Okay, let's talk more about the talks that went on in Geneva and the significance moving forward for both U.S., China, and the global economy. Joining us for that, Einar Tangen. Einar is a senior fellow at the Taihe Institute and founder of Asia Narrative Substack. Einar, always good to see you. And this has been pretty interesting, I guess, 48, 72 hours or so. Give us your big takeaway from the deal that was reached, because China is arguing its firm stance ended up with them getting the best of the deal. Do you think that that is true?
Well, obviously, I mean, the climb down from 145% down to 30% is quite a significant amount. The idea of empty store shelves, rising unemployment, higher prices, and don't forget the bond market, made it very clear that Donald Trump needed to change. His modus operandi is to shock people, throw something out, see what shakes loose, and then try to do something. In this particular case, he made a bigger bluff than he could support, and he was called by China. Now they're getting down to brass tacks.
You know, you talked about the empty shelves, the concern about employment, recession. What immediate effects do you think we can expect this deal to have on the U.S. economy? Because remember, the 145% tariffs imposed by the Trump administration had all but stopped bilateral trade between the two largest economies on earth.
Yeah, you're going to see some empty shelves. There's going to be a rush to get all of these container ships headed back to the port of Los Angeles and elsewhere so they can restock. You're going to see a lot of companies making big orders to try to race against this 90 days. But, Sean, it's really important to understand that, there's a time frame involved here. And unfortunately, that makes everything uncertain. So people are reacting to the moment, but they're not absolutely clear about what's going to happen in the future. If you looked at Donald Trump's speech, it was the speech of somebody who was not the same person who's on the campaign trail. He seemed subdued. He kept on talking about a reunification in terms of China. I didn't quite understand that. He wandered. He did refer to the phase one deal. And quite frankly, I believe that that's where things will end up, and that is the carrot, as opposed to the stick of the effective tariffs, where you could end up with something which keeps his administration saying they've declared victory.
Let's talk about the Chinese economy, what it gets out of this, because the Chinese government had been very active and has been for some time negotiating new trade deals, especially with global South nations, as well as the Belt and Road. It has its tentacles in land and sea all over the world. So how important is this for the Chinese economy?
Well, there's two parts to it. I mean, the U.S. Is not the largest part of their exports, but it's still a large part of the global demand. So in the immediate term, I mean, you're going to see a lot of factories working overtime as they try to beat the 90-day deadline. But overall, remember, the issue here is global demand. China has trade relations with over 120 countries. Those countries depend on a lot on the U.S. demand. So it's all going in a positive direction as long as it continues. But, the uncertainty factor, are you ready as businessmen to invest based on a 90-day tariff reprieve? I don't think so.
Yeah, we heard that from so many people that it's so difficult to plan in the future, let alone 6 months down the road, but even next week. So with that in mind, do you see this deal as a genuine step toward easing tensions?
Well, obviously, it's eased tensions. I was concerned about whether or not Donald Trump would try to backtrack on this deal, depending on how the markets, his polling, and also the news sources treated it. So far, the markets are terrific. I expect a small jump in his polls. There's still that uncertainty. But the news agencies are panning him. They're saying he's back down, et cetera, et cetera. I think he's just become realistic. And as I said, the carrot at the end of this stick is the phase two, which allows him to say, look, I got China to buy a lot of stuff from the United States.
I can't help but to think back on as COVID began to wind down. It took a long time for the supply chain to fire back up again and be as effective as it always had been. So what should businesses and investors be watching for in the coming weeks? Because we've all seen the video of the vacant U.S. ports and store owners worried about not only the summer months, but even the important holiday shopping. So what does this slowdown mean to the supply chain moving forward?
Well, the supply chain is only so resilient. It's not like you can say, okay, turn the switch on and everything magically appears at the port. It takes weeks for one of these container ships to make its way from China to the United States. That's what I was saying. You are going to see some empty shelves. You are going to see some price rises due to scarcity, et cetera, like this. But in terms of going forward, it all depends on these negotiations. If they can make very swift progress on outlining what the quote deal is going to be, it's fine. But time is not on Donald Trump's side. And I think that's one of the deciding factors on why things moved as quickly as they did, just over a couple of days. I mean, before that, it was all, I'll never back down, and, this is the way it's going to be. Then 2 days later, he says, oh, yeah, victory. I took it down to 30% from 145.